In uncertain markets, the only compass that works is the one you build before the storm, because the chart won't save you if your rules arrive late. When traders tell me they're waiting for clarity, I hear a code phrase for wandering. Markets don't deliver clarity. They test for it. Jesse Livermore learned that the hard way, and then turned uncertainty into his living. He didn't seek prediction. He sought orientation. That's what I want to give you in this film. The Livermore Compass. 4 cardinal points you can hold in your hand when the tape turns foggy and the headlines grow teeth. I'm not talking about motivational posters. I'm talking about a navigational kit you can use on a Tuesday when breadth is split, volatility is angry, and your favorite setup starts looking like a stranger. Here are the coordinates I carry. North is conditions. Before I privilege any idea, I label the tape itself. Forgiving, neutral, or ruthless. Forgiving markets sponsor decent entries. Small errors live. Neutral markets demand better timing and smaller frequency. Ruthless markets kill good ideas on contact. That single label dictates my day. Attempt count, default size, and how high the confirmation bar sits. I don't let a beautiful chart overrule an ugly ocean. East is confirmation. In uncertainty, my eyes lie to me. So I force the tape to perform a sequence before I deploy size. Reclaim and hold a meaningful level. Pull back and find sponsorship. Push with participation. A scout goes first, tiny, informational, unemotional. If the sequence appears, I add from profits. If it fails, the scout dies cheaply at disproof or at a time stop that prevents hostage trades. I don't need to be early. I need to be paid. South is control. Risk is navigation. I pre-commit. Per trade risk in R, daily 2R circuit breaker, platform enforced. Correlation budget by factor rather than ticker. So 5 rhyming names don't impersonate diversification. I survive uncertainty by sizing my curiosity and refusing to let redemption drive the wheel. If I hit my number, I leave the room. Tomorrow's operator is worth more than today's argument. West is cash. Flat is not failure. It's inventory, attention, optionality, and the right to pounce when the fog thins. Livermore used cash the way sailors use harbor, not as retreat but as a place to refit the ship. In uncertain markets, the most aggressive posture is often patience guarded by rules. That is the compass, and it changes the emotion in the room. I don't ask, will I win? I ask, where am I? If I can answer that, entries calm down, exits get clean, and campaigns stop depending on mood. In the next section, I'll open the most dangerous rift in navigation, the inner conflict that uncertainty amplifies. The battle between the part of me that needs to act and the part that knows I must wait until proof arrives. When the market gets foggy, which direction do you lose first? Conditions, confirmation, control, or cash? Drop your answer and I'll tune the compass to your biggest gap in the next sections. The inner conflict, or market paradox. Moving from that compass into the first live minutes of uncertainty, I feel the same split I've known since my earliest trades. One part of me wants to act because action feels like protection. The other wants to wait because waiting feels like wisdom. Uncertain markets amplify both urges and punish both when they're out of sequence. If I act before the tape defines conditions north, I end up trying to row against a current I never measured. If I wait past confirmation east, I miss the very sponsorship I demanded and then chase it out of shame. The paradox is not that both instincts are wrong. It's that both are right only when they obey order. I keep that order literal. Before the bell, I tag the ocean, not the ship. Breadth, realized ATR versus its 20-day leadership persistence and factor coupling. Tell me whether the tape is forgiving, neutral, or ruthless. That one adjective sets my permissions. Attempt cap, default size, confirmation height. In a forgiving tape, I can afford a wider lane between scout and ad. In a ruthless tape, the lane narrows to inches. The conflict softens when my ambition is tied to the label rather than to my feelings. Then comes the temptation to invent proof. In fog, the mind promotes a single uptick to sponsorship, just to quiet the itch to move. I counter that by demanding a sequence I can describe in verbs: reclaim and hold, pull back and get sponsored, push with participation. If any link is missing, conviction has nothing to follow. My first order is a scout, bracketed with disproof and a time stop. The size is deliberately boring so I can learn without turning the question into a statement about identity. Uncertainty also distorts time. Minutes of silence feel like hours of danger, and I begin to negotiate with the clock. That's where the time stop is more than a risk tool, it's a psychological fuse. When the window closes without behavior, I'm flat. Not because I'm scared, but because the idea failed its appointment. This preserves the only resource that compounds longer than capital: my attention. The conflict gets sneakier through correlation. In a foggy tape, I can open 4 tickers that rhyme and convince myself I'm diversified. In reality, I've built one oversized bet in a trench coat. I avoid that by counting exposure by character, factor, theme, capping total open risk per factor, and reducing the basket together when the index shoves. My caution stops me from multiplying a single opinion. My ambition survives to press when a new proof wave emerges. Finally, I accept that days exist when cash, west, is the only correct position. Flat is not indecision. It's alignment with the compass. When the tape clarifies, when north is tagged, east performs its sequence, south has my guardrails armed. Ambition gets the keys and the campaign begins. Until then, I let patience do the aggressive thing. It protects me long enough to be present for the move that matters. Coming out of that inner conflict, I can tell you where uncertainty actually defeats me. It doesn't start on the chart. It starts in my vocabulary. In foggy tapes, I begin to renaming things so they stop hurting. Wait for confirmation becomes, this looks close enough. Stop at disproof becomes, give it room. Scout first becomes, start meaningful so it counts. Those are not market observations. Those are emotional edits. Jesse Livermore warned that the first leak isn't capital. It's clarity. When language starts doing the job that proof should do, consistency collapses in slow motion. The first trap is manufactured confirmation. In uncertainty, my mind is so eager to exit doubt that it promotes a single uptick to sponsorship or a polite pause to absorption. Livermore's cure is to define confirmation as a sequence. I can't fake, reclaim, and hold a meaningful level. Pull back and find sponsorship. Buyers stepping in where they should. Push with participation, volume and breadth present. If any link is missing, conviction has nothing legitimate to follow. The sequence keeps me from baptizing noise as signal. The second trap is time distortion. In fog, minutes feel like hours and I start negotiating with the clock. That's how hostage trades are born. Positions that don't violate a price level but quietly violate tempo. Draining my attention until the next valid invitation arrives and I'm too numb to accept it. Livermore paired every price stop with a time stop. If the idea expects momentum within a window and the tape withholds it, the trade is stale. Out, no speeches. The third is the classic averaging down dressed up as improving basis. Under the compass, it's obviously illogical. If conviction trails proof, adding after disproof is contradiction, not courage. It's not risk management. It's identity management, trying to buy back the right to be right. Livermore called that quicksand, because each scoop of size lowers mobility until the only life-saving decision, exit, feels impossible. There's also the narrative stop, moving a stop to where discomfort is lower rather than where the idea dies. A thesis dies at structure breaks, loss of the higher low, failed reclaims, a level that should act as support doesn't, or at the time boundary. Anywhere else is anesthesia. He wrote stops as contracts with reality, not a negotiation with nerves. A sneakier trap is correlation blindness. In uncertain markets, factors dominate. I open 5 tickers that rhyme and convince myself I'm diversified. In truth, I've built one bet in a trench coat. Livermore diversified by character, leader versus laggard, momentum versus mean reversion, cyclical versus defensive, so a single macro shove couldn't bulldoze his day. Counting exposure by ticker is theater. Counting by factor is navigation. Finally, there's method drift. A handful of small losses in a foggy tape and the urge to rebuild the airplane mid-flight is overwhelming. New indicator, new time frame, new market. Sometimes regimes do change. More often, variance is wearing a mask. Livermore's antidote was fixed trial counts. Only after X fully qualified trades in the same regime would he evaluate tweaks. That guardrail keeps boredom from masquerading as innovation. When I stack these traps, manufactured proof, time distortion, averaging down, narrative stops, correlation blindness, method drift, I'm really mapping one core problem. I want relief more than truth. The Livermore Compass exists to insult that impulse. It forces me back to north, tag conditions, east, demand sequence, south, enforce risk and time, and west, use cash as inventory. With those bearings set, the fog doesn't vanish, but it stops deciding for me. Which trap hits you hardest in uncertain markets? Manufactured confirmation, time distortion, or correlation blindness? Drop yours below and I'll address it directly as we shift into Livermore's lens. Livermore's perspective on the situation. When I strip away my modern dashboards and the language we've built around factors and ATR, I can still hear Livermore's framework underneath, and it matches the compass point for point. He walked into every session assuming two things. The crowd will behave like a crowd and he himself is not immune to it. Those assumptions sound cynical. They're generous. They freed him from expecting certainty and forced him to build orientation. His version of North conditions wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a reading of the tape's temperament. He separated forgiving markets from ruthless ones the way a sailor separates open water from reefs. In forgiving phases, he tolerated a wider lane between test and size because sponsorship tended to appear where it should. In ruthless phases, he compressed everything. Fewer attempts, higher thresholds, and a readiness to stand aside. He didn't let any single chart bully him out of that macro read. If the ocean was ugly, he shrank the ship. That's not timidity. That's seamanship. What I call East confirmation. Lived in his insistence on sequences, not snapshots. He demanded that price not only reclaim a meaningful level but also hold it. That pullbacks not only pause but also attract buyers. That pushes not only lift but also earn participation. He sent out a scout first to ask the market a yes-no question, and only added from progress when the answer repeated with clarity. That rhythm demoted prediction and promoted evidence. It also made averaging down logically impossible for him. If conviction trails proof, adding after disproof is self-contradiction. For South control, he treated risk like navigation rules rather than suggestions. His stops lived where the idea died, beneath reclaimed levels that must act as support, below the last higher low that defined structure, or at the time, boundary after which a valid move owed him momentum. That last one matters most in fog. The time stop is a contract with tempo. He also diversified by character instead of ticker. So one macro shove couldn't bulldoze a basket of names that rhymed, and when his daily pain limit hit, he didn't debate it. He left the room. He was protecting the instrument he traded with first, his mind. Finally, West. Cash meant optionality, not emptiness. Flat gave him three things he valued more than action. A clean read, dry powder, and dignity. Cash kept boredom from masquerading as urgency. It also made his aggression credible when proof did arrive, because he had the capital and the calm to scale. What I learned from laying his perspective over my compass is that uncertain markets don't demand brilliance. They demand choreography. Conditions gate permissions. Confirmation unlocks size. Control ends arguments with price and time. Cash preserves attention. The moment I follow that order, the fog doesn't lift, but I stop walking in circles. From here, the most honest test is to put the compass to work on a single campaign. One name, one plan, and a sequence that either earns its ads or dies cleanly. So you can see how this translates from theory into the minute-by-minute choices that decide a day. I put the compass to work on a single campaign because uncertainty exposes shortcuts. The instrument was Mariner Tech, a liquid name leading a half-awake group. I refused to make a basket. 4 tickers that rhyme would only disguise one exposure. Pre-open, I ran the 4 bearings. North, conditions. Breadth split but improving. Realized ATR easing toward the 20-day leadership stable. Factor coupling moderate. I tagged the tape neutral. Not a green light, not a red light. A yellow that demands sequence. That label set my permissions. 4 attempts max. Standard scout size, confirmation bar 1 notch higher than usual. I mapped 3 levels before touching an order. The reclaim line, last week's high that had failed twice. The structure pivot, the most recent higher low on the 60-minute. And a time window, 90 minutes for momentum to reveal itself after any entry. East, confirmation, had to show in verbs, not vibes. Reclaim and hold, pull back and get sponsored, push with participation. No single candle would graduate to proof. At the open, Mariner Tech dipped toward VDAWAP, then climbed with the kind of cadence that doesn't beg for applause, impulse without frenzy, pullbacks that breathed. It kissed the reclaim line and paused. I waited. One uptick is not a choir. On the second approach, it reclaimed and held for several minutes while bids stepped up and the group ETF nudged higher. I sent a scout, small enough to be tuition if wrong, meaningful enough to anchor learning if right. The bracket sat exactly where the idea would die. Below the reclaim plus a small volatility cushion, the time stop clock started. The first pullback arrived, Spreads stayed tight. Sellers looked uncommitted. The higher low printed above the reclaim. Volume expanded on the next push. That unlocked unit number 2, explicitly funded by the scouts unrealized. Now south, control mattered more than comfort. I checked correlation. 2 peers confirmed with similar character. Index internals held neutral. If factor flow turned, I would reduce the basket even if Mariner Tech still looked fine. Because waves, not raindrops, sink boats. Midday drift-tested patience. Silence invites narrative, and narrative invents proof. The time window kept me honest. At minute 70, the stock printed an inside bar and then shifted range up with clean participation. Unit number 3 unlocked. Again, paid by progress. Into the first measured extension, I scaled a third to bank campaign profit and raised the stop. On the remainder beneath the intraday structure that now defined the thesis. No teacher trades. If the entire paid move vanished, I would cut without speeches. Late afternoon, factor coupling tightened as the index flicked red. I trimmed exposure across the basket, led name and cousin name together, because risk had arrived as a wave. Mariner Tech dipped, kissed the trail and held. Into the close, I left a small runner and accepted an overnight only because structure supported it. The next morning opened lower just enough to tag the trail. Flat, green, unremarkable. Exactly how professional exits should feel. The journal mattered more than the dollars. North tagged, east obeyed as sequence, south enforced by price and time, west respected whenever nothing performed the ritual. No round trips, no identity auditions. The compass didn't make the fog vanish. It kept me from walking in circles. In that campaign, which bearing felt hardest to honor for you? Waiting for the full east sequence and forcing the south time stop, or trimming the factor basket when the index shoved? Tell me below and I'll adjust the next sections toward it. Emotional low point or turning point. The campaign ended clean, but uncertainty has a way of sneaking back in through the side door. Routine. The next 2 sessions looked ordinary on the surface and corrosive underneath. I noticed it first in the way I opened the platform. 5 minutes earlier, checklist skimmed faster. A quiet assumption that the compass would read the same as yesterday. North actually shifted. Breadth thinned, realized ATR ticked up, factor coupling tightened. But I let the memory of Mariner Tech whisper, "You've got rhythm." That's the first step toward getting lost. Not a broken rule, a borrowed mood. My neutral tag should have slipped to ruthless, cutting attempts and raising the confirmation bar. Instead, I gave myself permission to work through it. The first scout I took was perfectly textbook and died quickly at disproof, 2-ish and paid. The second should have been slower, but I pressed it to recover tone rather than collect information. It died too, still small, still clean. But the meaning began to change. When the third opportunity emerged, I felt my breathing shorten as if the chart had insulted me. That sensation, heat without evidence, is how hostage trades are born. The tape answered with indifference. The reclaim stuttered, sponsorship didn't appear, volume refused to join the push, and the time window ticked toward expiry. I watched. My cursor hovered near the stop and witnessed the most expensive sentence I know form in my head. Give it a little room. I didn't move the stop, but I moved it in thought, which is the same trespass, just not on the ticket yet. That was my cue. I closed where the plan said close. The loss was small. The rescue was large. I had intercepted the story before it hired my capital. I walked. Shoes, water, air. When I sat back down, the journal reduced me to facts. What the tape proved. Failed follow-through. Sticky supply at obvious levels. Participation narrowing. Factor wave heavy. What I assumed without proof. A reclaim was due. This was a shakeout. Leaders don't break trend like this. I had tried to trade a memory. Livermore's voice, at least the one I've cultivated, cut through. The market owes me nothing but behavior. When behavior changes, my bearing must change with I turned the compass into enforcement, not advice. North toggled to ruthless on screen, which instantly lowered attempts and forced half size. East remained a verb list I had to check out loud. Reclaim and hold, pull back and sponsor, push with participation. If one verb went missing, conviction had nothing to follow. South tightened. Price stop at disproof. Time stop enforced by automation so boredom couldn't apply for a longer leash. Broker side, 2R circuit breaker armed. West took over by design, flat, watching, letting optionality feel like inventory rather than emptiness. The next morning gave me the real pivot. 2 scans, 0 sequences, and an absence of shame. Flat all morning, then a single clear reclaim late day. I sent the scout and it answered no within minutes. Out. No speeches. Process score high, P&L negligible, attention intact. That felt like strength because it preserved the one thing uncertainty tries to steal, my ability to return to the rules on demand. In your own drawdowns, what gets you first? The quiet, give it room negotiation, the urge to add back tone, or the refusal to downgrade north when conditions turn ruthless? Tell me below and I'll tailor the next section's rule so it shuts that door. Coming out of that pivot, I stopped treating the compass as advice and rebuilt it as automation around one sentence that Livermore proved with his life. Proof, before conviction, not a motto and operating system. If I can't make that rule impossible to ignore, uncertainty will keep selling me relief dressed as evidence. I organize the rule into 4 bearings so tight they trip one another if I drift. North, conditions hires or fires my ambition before the bell. If the dashboard reads ruthless, thin breath, elevated ATR, coupled factors, then ambition is benched. 3 attempts, half-size default, confirmation bar +2. Neutral loosens to 3 to 4 attempts, normal bar. Forgiving allows more trials and simpler timing. This is where the old me would rationalize a special setup. The new me lets the adjective decide. The moment I tag north as ruthless, my platform changes my max order size and attempt counter. I don't argue with code east. Confirmation is the choreography that stops manufactured proof. I require a sequence I can speak in verbs. Reclaim and hold. Pull back and get sponsored. Push with participation. I send a scout to ask the question and nothing more. If the proof arrives, I add from profits unit number 2 only when the scout's unrealized funds the extra risk. Unit number 3 only on fresh proof, range shift, or leadership confirmation. If proof fails or stalls, the scout dies at disproof or time. This is also where Livermore's never average a loser stops being moralizing and becomes logic. If conviction must follow proof, adding against disproof is contradiction, not courage. South, control turns exits into contracts with reality, not negotiations with nerves. Price stop sits exactly where the idea dies. Below the reclaimed level that must act as support, beneath the last higher low that defines structure, or under the pivot my thesis depends on. The time stop protects cognition. A momentum idea owes me behavior inside a clear window. Beyond it, the position is stale regardless of price. I cap factor risk, yin1 on 3R so 5 rhyming tickers can't impersonate diversification, and I enforce a broker side 2R daily loss limit that refuses new orders. Past that number, my brain wants redemption more than information. Proof before conviction cannot survive redemption. West. Cash is the backbone that keeps the other bearings honest. Flat is optionality, not absence. Cash buys attention for the next clear sequence and capital for the next paid ad. In foggy phases, West is my most aggressive stance because it denies drift the oxygen it needs. This was Livermore's quiet power, the dignity to do nothing until the tape hired him. I wrote one more line under the compass to close the loop. Protect the staying to earn the staying. My ability to sit tight in a correct campaign is purchased by the small, disciplined exits I took when proof failed. Uncertainty wants me to chase meaning. This rule forces meaning to present itself through behavior. When it does, my size is funded, my exits are pre-written, and my identity is not on the ticket. If you could only cement one part tomorrow, north, auto-sizing by regime, east, scout, paid ad sequence, or south, time stop plus, 2R hard stop, which would erase the most inconsistency for you? Tell me and I'll compress it into a one-line rule for your screen. How it applies to modern traders picking up from the compass I rebuilt in the last section. The translation to a modern desk is about turning principles into defaults, so my best behavior happens automatically, and my worst behavior requires effort. I start the day with north wired into a small dashboard, index breadth verse 20 day, realized ATR verse 20 day, leadership persistence, new highs among my liquid universe, and a factor coupling score. One click sets the label, forgiving, neutral, ruthless, and pushes settings to the broker. Max attempts, 543, Default size 1 door, 0 and 7 fire, 0 fire. And confirmation threshold, bar 2. The point is that my ambition is hired or benched by conditions, not by my mood. East becomes order architecture. Every first ticket is a bracketed scout, OCO. Stop parked at disproof, a profit-taking leg that only exists to finance unit number 2, and a timer that enforces the time stop. I add only on fresh proof, range shift, retest and go with real sponsorship or leadership confirmation across the group. The platform prevents me from adding unless the scout's unrealized covers the incremental risk. I can feel eager or bored. The machine doesn't care. Aggression is policy, not personality. South lives in 3 guardrails. First, price stops sit where the thesis dies, below the reclaimed level that must act as support, beneath the last higher low, or under the pivot the campaign depends on. Second, the time stop closes dead air without ceremony. Hostage trades never get a chance to hollow out discipline. Third, factor caps keep me honest when markets go macro. I cap open risk per theme at 3R and reduce the basket as one decision if the index shoves. I also run a broker-side 2R day stop that blocks new risk, because after that line, the brain hunts redemption, not information. West is a posture I practice on purpose. I schedule watch-only blocks even in forgiving tapes if my readiness, sleep, distractions, residual emotion, scores low. Cash becomes inventory. Optionality for the next proof and attention for the next read. I no longer measure myself by activity. I measure myself by alignment with the compass. I divide the session into roles to prevent drift. Analyst mode, pre-open. Tag north. Write setup cards, entry behavior, disproof, time window, add criteria. Operator mode, leave. Execute only what's on the card, no edits. Auditor mode, post-close. 2 columns. What the tape proved versus what I assumed without proof, plus a process score, 0 to 5, next to P&L. Every 30 qualified trades in the same regime. I review parameters. Variance alone is not permission to tweak. That cadence keeps my method from shape-shifting to soothe feelings. Finally, I make consistency visible. I keep an attempt counter on screen, color-coded to regime. I show factor heat maps next to my blotter, so 5 rhyming tickers can't impersonate diversification. Alerts are behavioral. Reclaim and hold 15 Emenrio, sponsored pullback, rather than price only. And I maintain a small recovery playbook. After any 6R week or 3 rule breaks, I trade half size for 10 clean executions before normal permissions return. That's how the compass survives fog and speed. Proof hires conviction. The market fund size and my tools protect the operator long enough to meet the next obvious move. I keep the whole compass on one laminated page, so the sequence decides when my mood wants to. Here's the exact daily flow I run, start to close, so uncertainty can't sneak in through improvisation. Pre-open 10 minutes, tag north and set permissions. I read 4 dials. The index breadth versus 20-day average. B realized ATR versus 20-day. C leadership persistence, new highs, relative strength among my liquid list. D factor coupling. I assign forgiving, neutral, ruthless. That single adjective autoloads my broker presets. Attempts cap, 543. Default risk per trade, 0.0.7 far 0.4 nar. And confirmation height, prom 1 line new. If I can't label it, I default to ruthless. Write the setup card, not from memory. For each strategy, I fill 4 blanks before any order. Entry behavior, e.g., prior high reclaim and hold plus sponsored. Pullback disproof price stop, beneath. Reclaimed level plus volatility cushion or below. Last higher low, time stop, momentum must appear within N. Bars minutes, add criteria. Only on range shift or retest and go with participation. East is order architecture, scout paid ads. First ticket is a bracketed scout, OCO. Stop at disproof. Profit takes size to finance unit number 2, and a timer for the time stop. Platform logic blocks ads unless the prior unit's unrealized funds. The extra risk and fresh proof appears. Unit number 3 unlocks only on a second independent proof, leadership confirmation, or another range shift. No mood ads, no make-back ads. South is guardrails, price, time, and factor caps. Price stop lives where the idea dies, not where discomfort eases. Time stop flattens hostage trades. If the window closes without behavior, I'm out, no speeches. Factor risk cap, Brinastier 3R across any single theme. 5 rhyming tickers count as 1 exposure. If the index shoves, I reduce the basket as a unit. Broker side 2R day stop refuses new orders. Weekly draw 6R triggers half size until 10 clean. Execution rhythm intraday. I operate in roles. Analyst, scan, ag, write cards, operator, execute only what's written, auditor, log outcomes. I never mix roles. Editing rules while in a trade is a yellow card. Alerts are behavioral. Reclaim and hold 15 men. Sponsored pullback. Not price only. 6. Scaling and exit choreography. At first measured extension or plus 2R, I take a partial and raise the stop under meaningful structure. If the campaign gives back the entire paid move, I cut size without narrative. End of day. If a runner survives, stop migrates beneath the last swing that defines the thesis. No overnight without structure. Post-close audit, 10 minutes. 2 columns. What the tape proved versus what I assumed without proof. I score process 0 to 5 beside P&L and color code rule breaks. Time stop ignored, narrative stop, correlation breach. Every 30 qualified trades in the same regime, I review parameters. Variance alone is not permission to tweak. 8. Reset ritual. Any violation or 2R flips me to recovery mode. Screens off. Walk, water, breath, journal, then half size for 10 fully qualified trades. Cash is inventory. Tomorrow's operator is the asset. Cinematic conclusion plus emotional sign-off. I close the day by turning the compass face up on the desk and reading it like a logbook. North tells me whether I honored the ocean I actually sailed, not the one I remembered. East tells me if I demanded a sequence before I demanded results. South records whether exits were contracts with reality in both price and time. West answers the most private question of them all. Could I be flat without shame when nothing deserved me? If those bearings align, the numbers take care of themselves over stretches longer than any single session. If they don't, there's nothing on a chart that can protect me from the next storm. Uncertain markets didn't get simpler while we talked. They rarely do. What changed was my posture. I stopped asking the screen for permission and started asking my rules. The difference is felt most in the tone of my decisions. Entries are quiet because the compass already argued for them. Ads are funded because progress, not pride, unlocked them. Exits are clean because I wrote their terms while calm. There is no heroism in any of it, and that absence is the point. I arrive ready to be small until the market makes me big, and when it withdraws its sponsorship, I become small again without ceremony. I used to think navigation was a matter of superior forecasts. It's not. It's a matter of superior sequence. Conditions gate my aggression before I feel ambitious. Confirmation choreographs action, so I don't baptize noise as signal. Control, price, time, correlation, and the 2R fuse turns panic into procedure. Cash preserves attention so opportunity can find me alive instead of exhausted. That is the shape of the Livermore Compass when it's lived, not quoted. It doesn't eliminate fog. It prevents me from walking in circles until the horizon appears again. There is a particular calm that arrives near the close when the compass has been obeyed. The cursor is still. The breathing is even. I don't replay what I might have done with perfect hindsight. I review whether I stayed aligned when visibility was low. On days when nothing qualified, I end with full attention and full optionality. On days when something did, I end with a position that can carry itself because each piece of size was paid for by the piece beneath it. Either way, I am solvent in capital and in focus, which is the only state from which compounding is possible. So I mark the regime I traded, score process beside P&L, and copy one sentence under tomorrow's plan to keep the bearings honest. Proof before conviction. Then I shut down before fatigue can write new rules. The market will offer another uncertain ocean in the morning. I don't need to predict the weather. I need to arrive with the compass already set. So the best version of me is the path of least resistance when the next clear current finally takes hold.